Hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, some place marker chalkboards. Well, I was looking for an idea to use up some of the chalkboard paint that I purchased for our menu chalkboard that we made a while back on the show. And the idea came to me that I could make miniature chalkboards to use as place markers for parties and that sort of thing. Now, I want to keep the build as simple as I can, and I want to keep the joinery to a minimum. That way, this is a project that is great for scrap, and as well, it's accessible to all levels of woodworking. So for that, we're going to start with some 1/2-inch plywood. I want the dimensions of the writing area or the writing surface to be roughly 4 by 6 inches. But what I want is to frame around them. And that's where this 1/2-inch plywood comes in. So for starters, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a bunch of this 1/2-inch plywood into 5-inch by 7-inch pieces. Well, these 5 by 7 pieces of 1/2-inch thick plywood are going to be the frame for our chalkboards. I did say I want to make this as simple as possible. So what I need to do to each one of these pieces is I want to place a line in from each edge at 3/4 of an inch. And that has now effectively marked out our frame. So after we get all of these marked out, all we're going to do is we're going to drill a blade entry hole and we're going to cut them all out over at the scroll saw. So with the number 7 reverse tooth blade, we're just going to cut out the center of our frame now. And at this point, you want to put your center core to the side. We're going to use this later. Well, now that I have all of my frames cut, I want to round off these outside corners. So I'm going to get a circle template. I'm going to use a 1-inch circle template, place the markings on each one of these frames, and then I'm going to round them off over at the belt sander. Well, you now have your cute little frame here, or in my case 15 of them. And well, now it's time to do the rabbet on the back side that's going to allow our chalkboard to be inset into it. So let's head over to the router table and I'll show you how we're going to accomplish that. Well, what I have installed in the router table is a bearing guided rabbet bit. And depending on the size of the bearing that you put on it, it will cut different sizes of rabbets. And for this one, I have a bearing installed so that it will cut a 1/4 inch wide rabbet in whatever it routes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to raise the blade up just a little bit, and I'm going to nibble away at these. I'm not going to cut the whole rabbet at once because it induces tear out. So I'm going to do it in about 3 stages, and eventually when I'm done, each one of our frames is going to have a 1/4 inch wide rabbet that is 5/16 of an inch deep. With our rabbet done in all of the frames, we're now going to use a 1/8 inch round over and round over both the front and the back outside edges of our frame. Well, the last step for the frames of your chalkboards is we're going to remove any pencil lines and give each of these frames a good sanding all the way around. Well, with all of our frames sanded and off to the side, it's now time to turn our attention to our offcuts that we cut out of the center of the frames. But first we need to make a template, and I'm going to walk you through that here, and hopefully you'll be able to follow along. Well, the first thing that we want to do on a piece of MDF or hardboard is I want to draw out a square that is going to be 4.5 inches long by 2 inches wide. I've taken our shop-made bevel and I've set it to 15 degrees, and from this bottom corner here right up to our line at 2 inches, we're going to draw a 15-degree angle there. From there, we want to take a mark from where this line at 15 degrees meets that line at 2 inches. We want to take a mark from there right down to our corner at 4.5 inches. Like that. Our next step is to measure from our line right here. We're going to measure in 1/2 inch and then again at another 1/2 inch. And once we get those two marks on there, we'll line up our bevel and we'll draw 2 more lines. We are now going to take a measurement from our second line here that we drew down 1 inch, just like that, and draw a square line from here over to our other line on that same plane. Our last step is to take an 1.25 inch circle template, and from this top here of our first line in, we're going to round this off. There we go, just like that. So now I'm going to take this over to the scroll saw. I'm going to carefully cut it out, and then I'll bring it back and I'll show you what our template looks like. And this is what we ended up with. The only thing I changed is I rounded off this back edge just to take away that really sharp corner. So now on each of our offcut pieces, all I'm going to do is line up our template here. We're going to trace around it. And once we get it traced, we're going to cut them out over at the scroll saw. And depending on how many frames you made, you're going to need 2 of these per frame, so they'll fit nicely on each one of your center offcuts. So with your pieces cut, what you have essentially done is made yourself a stand for each one of your chalkboards out of the remaining scrap. And of course you can place it in this landscape, or you can go to your portrait mode sort of thing. This is high-tech stuff, guys. So there you are. And cut out as many of these as you need, give them a good sanding, and we're pretty much done here. And there you have it. some place marker chalkboards. But how does the chalkboard come into it? Well, guys, I really didn't think that you needed a video of me painting 1/4 inch thick MDF, because that is what the chalkboard sections are made out of. In fact, they each got 2 coats of white latex primer and then 3 coats of the chalkboard paint, the same paint that I used for the menu chalkboard that we made quite some time ago on the show. I'll post a link to that show down below if you're interested. I just didn't think you needed to see a picture or a video of me painting. So what I did here is I cut each chalkboard to a 4x6 size, and while it's perfectly fine with our rabbets, while it's quite fine if you want to chisel that out to be sharp corners, what I did instead was I marked each one and rounded it off, each chalkboard on the sander, and by doing that I was just able to glue it in just with a little bit of wood glue, just the way it is. For those of you that are old enough, you may think this is quite familiar, and in fact it is, as I modeled it after an old school chalkboard that some of us, I won't say all of us, but some of us would have in our early school years, and I'm too young for it. Guys, this project has been a load of fun, and it was a great way to use up some 1/2 inch plywood. It's an easy project that takes a minimum of tools and a minimum of equipment. Most of the work was done on the scroll saw and the table saw, and you don't have to use the scroll saw if you don't want to. You don't even have to use plywood. If you wanted to bump this up a notch and make your frames out of solid stock, like maybe some maple or some mahogany or oak or whatever you like, if you wanted to take that and bump it up a bit to the next level and have these fancy wood frames, that's great. But I wanted to keep this as simple as I possibly could, and I think I achieved what I was out to do. So guys, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe and click that bell so that you don't miss the notifications of future episodes of the show. It's been a lot of fun bringing this to you. It took a little longer than I thought it was going to because I made 15 of them. It took an entire day in the shop, but time well spent and a lot of fun doing it. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this week's project. I hope you're going to try this for yourself, and more importantly, I honestly hope that you're going to join me next week when I bring you yet another woodworking video.